students, what's up? Today we're going to be talking about how and why you should share your story as a believer.
Yeah, I think one of the big things when we talk about this subject that people struggle with is not knowing how or not feeling like they're qualified to share their stories or to share the gospel with people.
Yeah, I'd agree. I know for me that was something that kind of held me back for a few years, was it's like I just don't really know how or really why. But something that you'll be happy to know is that there's certain tips that you can use while you're doing it, but there's not really one specific way to share your story because we're all different.
Right.
So some practical just things to keep in mind while you're sharing your story is to keep it short. Claire, what do you think a good length is for a story?
Yeah, I typically try to keep mine to like 3 to 5 minutes, kind of in that range. It kind of depends on your context too. Sometimes people ask you like, oh, tell me more about that. And then I think it's fine to go longer, but I generally try to keep it, short, maybe 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think that's a great time limit. Something else to keep in mind is to keep it real. I've talked to people before that maybe don't want to share their story because they were saved at a young age, and maybe nothing tragic or huge has ever happened in their life, so they feel like their story maybe isn't as beneficial to someone as someone who has a more meatier story, I guess. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's something I actually hear so often from students who grow up in church, and that's something that I think I kind of struggled with at some point in my life. But I think it's really, really important to just remember that each of us, if we have a relationship with Jesus, something miraculous has happened in our lives. And I think Pastor Josh says a lot that we're not passing from being a bad person to a good person, but from being dead to being alive. And so I think that's a great thing to remember, that this is huge. Like, whether or not it seems like you've been converted from, like, you used to do drugs and now you don't do drugs anymore, and like those kind of stories are always really cool to hear. But if your story is not like that, if your story is, when I was 6 years old I went to VBS and got saved, that's still a miraculous story.
Yeah, for sure. And the other side of it is people that maybe have been in something that, like drugs or something like that, you don't want to share that because you're maybe embarrassed. But I know for me that I found so much freedom when I first shared my real raw story to someone, because they actually reached out and was like, that's something that I was going through as well. And it was just so powerful for me to see how the Lord had brought me through that and was then using it to touch someone else. So really quick, whenever you're sharing your story, it's important to hit these 3 points. The first one is to talk about what your life was before Christ. Maybe give an example or two of how you were before you encountered Jesus. The second one is what happened when you did come to know Christ. Where were you? What happened? Did you say a prayer? Were you reading a book? What happened that drew you to Christ? And then the last thing is, what is your life now? How does it look now that the Lord's in it? And if you follow those 3 steps in sharing your story, then I think you are set up for success. So we are so glad that you watched this video, and we really hope that these tips helped you. And we would love to hear any stories. If you do take these tips, reach out to us and let us know.